Hi, my name is Spencer Dutson. I'm a licensed therapist and supervisor here at Cache Valley Counseling, and I'm so excited for you to be joining me here tonight for this Max group. So, as a therapist, I believe a lot in the importance of emotions. In fact, the majority of the people that I work with are, in my opinion, ultimately coming into my office because they have difficulties processing their emotions, and then it shows up in a variety of different ways. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today is something that comes from the researchers and therapists called the Gottmans. You may be familiar with them. They do a lot regarding like couple relationships, but they also have a couple of resources regarding parenting, and that's what I'm going to be focusing on today. They talk about a concept called emotion coaching. Um, and emotion coaching is all about how we show up for our kids to help them through their emotions. So before I get into this, let me give you my disclaimer. First, this is not therapy. It's a group of people who are coming together with a variety of different problems and looking for help and support in their therapeutic process to help them with change. If you're not feeling well, or you're feeling suicidal or having life-threatening thoughts, this group is not necessarily the place to discuss that. Please consider calling 988, getting in touch with your therapist as soon as possible, or reaching out to a loved one or emergency services to get help and resources if you need that. So, to dive right in, like I said, today I'm going to be talking about emotion coaching specifically and how the 5 steps of emotion coaching can help us raise emotionally intelligent children. So, like I said, this comes from the Gottmans, and they actually have a book that I'll show you here. It's just called Raising an Emotionally Intelligent Child, The Heart of Parenting. It's quite an old book, but it's decent. I never refer people to books that I haven't read myself, and I can say I've read this whole book. And for the most part, it's pretty practical, but also some of the stuff can be a bit impractical. With things like this, I always recommend that people take what you can, leave what you don't need, and hopefully you can get some good stuff from it. But regardless of that, what I'm going to be covering today should give you the basics of what emotion coaching looks like so you can get started with it in your parenting. Now, emotion coaching is going to be most effective with younger kids. Think preschool age, kindergarten age, and even earlier if you can start. So that like 3 to 5 range. And as soon as kids start to like be able to have a better ability to communicate and they have words, that's when emotion coaching can really start. Despite that, though, if you're kind of getting a late start, this can work just as well with teenagers. You just have to be mindful that with teenagers, especially if you're going to kind of change how you've been showing up in your parenting, just be mindful of that and let them know that, hey, this is something I'm learning. I want to be better at this. This is what it's going to look like for me, that kind of thing. And hopefully, as I go through this, if you do have teenagers, you'll be able to think of what could work or what couldn't work. And as always, if you're having struggle with the application of something like this or noticing any other significant problems in your parenting or with your kiddos, please get some additional help. So again, why does it matter? Why does emotion coaching as a concept matter? Well, like I said before, a lot of the clients that I see in my office tend to be coming in because at the end of the day, they struggle with emotional processing. Sure, it might manifest as anxiety or depression or an addiction or even, traumatic events that they couldn't make it through or process through when they live them. But at the end of the day, what I sense is if we can process through our emotional experiences better, especially the ones that are uncomfortable, we have healthier lives, so to speak. And our kids learn how to process their emotions through our examples as their parents and or caretakers. Now, it's true that kids can have other things that can impact how they process their emotions that's not solely dependent on our parenting, but obviously parenting and caretaking is going to play a big role in that. I can't tell you how many times my sons have done things that I've done that I'm like, shoot, I should not have done that because now I'm going to have to like work to kind of come back from that, right? So again, our kids learn from us, and so it's so important that we help them learn how to process through their emotions properly, and that's what I'm hoping to dive a little bit deeper into today. So I'll give an overview of what the 5 steps are, and then we'll go into them in a little bit more detail here in a second. So the first step of emotion coaching is be aware of your child's emotion. Number 2, recognize your child's expression of emotion as a perfect moment for intimacy and teaching. There's some disclaimers with that, which I'll get to. 3, listen with empathy and validate your child's feelings. 4, help your child learn how to label their emotions with words. And 5, set limits when helping your child to solve problems or deal with upsetting situations appropriately. Okay, that's where the coaching part really comes into play. Okay, so first, be aware of your child's emotions. So this is kind of just like a constant, right? It's not like a necessarily a set step. It's almost like a pre-step in my mind, right? And the first thing I'll ask you with this is, are you aware of your own emotions? Because if you're not, you're probably going to have a pretty hard time identifying the emotion that your kid is experiencing. So again, first and foremost, you've got to work on your own stuff, at least on the surface, being able to be aware of your emotions. So here are some things that could potentially help if you're struggling with this. First, if you Google search for something called an emotion wheel, you'll find tons of options or things that will show up for you that you can then, like images, right, that you can look at that can help you identify different emotions that you're feeling. Another system that I really like is an app called How We Feel. It's a completely free app, and it's one that allows you to check in with yourself at different times during the day or more as needed. And it gives you a ton of different emotions that you can select from, categorized based off of kind of the type of emotion, right? Is it an intense positive emotion or an intense negative emotion? Is it more of a calm negative emotion or a calm positive emotion? And it'll make more sense if you get the app. Again, it's completely free. It's available for both iOS and Android. And again, I would highly recommend it. It's really, really well done. But that's a good place to start when it comes to your own emotions and are you aware of what you're feeling? Because again, if you don't have it, you can't really give it to your child. So that's why I recommend starting there. The next thing that I'll encourage you to be aware of is that emotions look different in kids than they do for yourself or what you might see in other adults. And a big part of that is because kiddos don't have the protections that we have with our own emotions. For example, many of us tend to run away from our emotions or go to the opposite extreme and let our emotions control us in the form of like other negative outcomes or things like that. Kids don't have those protections, and so their emotions might look more raw. They might even look more like less verbal and more physical. Instead of saying I'm angry, your kiddo might lash out and try to hit you, or they're a sibling or something like that, right? But just know that emotions are going to look different in your kid than they do in you. If you're expecting your kid to express their emotions how you expect an adult or even yourself to do a kind of that emotional expression, you're going to be tripping over yourself before you even get started. So again, first and foremost, the first step to emotion coaching is be aware of your child's emotions, what they're feeling, or that they're feeling something. Not even necessarily what they're feeling yet, just that they're feeling something. Each kid is going to be a little bit unique too, so be aware of that how one child expresses their emotions might be different how another does, and comparing can be hard. Okay, so step number 2 of emotion coaching. Recognize your child's expression of emotion as a perfect moment for intimacy and teaching. So first, as a parent myself, I want to validate that, yeah, it can be very inconvenient to have our kids have an emotional reaction to something or to have an emotional meltdown or something like that. But we have to push that aside. Remember, our kids learn how to process their emotions from us, right? And so if what we do is react negatively to our kids' emotions, what we can inadvertently do is show them that their emotions are not okay, that they're bad for feeling certain ways, things like that. And I think I want to emphasize right here is that emotions are not bad, they just are. Sure, the actions or reactions connected to an emotion might be bad, but you have to separate the two, right? So if your kid is doing something bad, yeah, we want to make sure we teach them to not do that thing or that thing's inappropriate, but the emotion that drives it is just an emotion. Don't vilify the emotion. If you do, you're going to stunt your child's growth when it comes to their own emotional intelligence and being able to identify and work through their emotions. So to that point, make sure that you're working on your own coping and managing your own emotions better, right? So being able to have a neutral response as much as possible, which I know is really hard, can really, really help with that. And for me, I kind of have to like psych myself up, right? So at the beginning of my day, or if something kind of triggering happens, I have to remind myself constantly, like, hey, this is not about me. Don't freak out. Like, he's a kid, right? I have two boys. Um, and things like that to keep myself neutral so that when my kiddo freaks out or has this like emotional outburst, I'm able to show up for him instead of being overwhelmed by him. Okay. And again, this takes time. Be patient with yourself. And if you're having a really hard time with this, get some help. Talk to friends and family. Go see a therapist. Something like that can be very, very beneficial. But again, not reacting to their emotions can really, really help. Now, another thing that I'll emphasize here that can help us in seeing that our kids' expressions of emotions as a chance to connect, and a chance to teach is recognizing that emotions are a way that kids reach for us. So emotions are instinctual. They're the body's natural process or way of being able to say, hey, something's up, need to be aware of this, etc. And so if you can see and remember that your kids' emotions are a way to connect, that can be really, really helpful in keeping yourself neutral and seeing it as an opportunity to connect and to teach, even with the hard emotions, right? Or even with the ones that are like inconvenient to us. And so, for example, you may be already aware of this, but one thing that we know quite well from child development is that kids push boundaries, okay? And so when it comes to emotions, it might kind of feel or seem like that's what they're doing because in a way they are. They're pushing their boundaries to see what can I get away with, but more importantly, how will my parent respond here? And can I trust that they're going to respond appropriately? Again, this is basic needs, right? This is basic survival stuff for kids because if you respond well, that tells them, oh, my parent is safe. I can go to them for things. And that helps my safety, right? Keeps me alive. That's how kids are wired. And so being able to see that emotion as an attempt for them to reach us, even if it feels like they're pushing us away, can be very, very valuable and just seeing it as an opportunity. Okay, so with that, though, I do have a caveat, okay? Kind of this one and kind of going to the next step, which is listen with empathy and validate your child's feelings. The Gottmans talk about something that they kind of call green light, yellow light, red light, okay? And it's to help us understand when emotion coaching is going to be most effective. So to break it down, a green light emotion or moment is a moment in which there's no safety concern and no significant thing that we need to stop or put an end to. Basically, a moment where your kid is just feeling something, and that's pretty much it, right? So you offer them something for lunch, and they kind of freak out and get really sad and are kind of really emotional, right? There's no real safety concern, no real big issue. That's a green light moment because it's a perfect moment for you to help coach them through that emotional experience, okay? A red light moment, to go the other extreme, is a moment where there is a significant safety concern that you need to stop immediately, okay? So for example, you're at the park and you tell your kid, hey, we've got to go home. They freak out, get really angry, and they start booking it away from you, right? And they happen to be going in the direction of a very busy street. That's not a moment where you want to be like, hey, let's stop and slow down and can we talk about what you're feeling? That's a moment where you should probably just run and grab your kid and pick them up so they can't run into a busy street and get hurt, right? So that's a red light moment. It's a significant safety concern where emotion coaching just isn't appropriate, okay? Other kind of red light moments that can happen often when you have siblings involved is if there's a safety concern between siblings, right? So one of your kiddos gets angry and starts hitting or attacking the other kid. Again, not a moment to sit and do emotion coaching. You need to break that up, separate these kids, give them some space to calm down, that kind of thing, right? A yellow light moment is obviously the in-between. So a yellow light moment could be either or. And what I always tell parents is first and foremost, default to safety. So if there's a safety concern and you're worried about someone getting hurt, please just treat it as if it were a red light moment, jumping into the green light emotion coaching as soon as you possibly can. trusting that your kids will kind of guide you in that process. So, if it's a yellow light moment and you treat it as a red light moment and stop your kid, you should be able to go pretty quick into a green light moment if they're ready. If not, they'll tell you and you'll need to give them more time because they won't be ready to talk to you, right? If you treat it as a red light moment, but it's really a green light moment, that'll be pretty clear as well pretty quickly because your kid will send you some type of signal, most likely, letting you know, hey, I'm not really in that place, or it's not really this, I'm just really upset, kind of deal. Okay. But again, with yellow light moments, I like to recommend default to safety if you ever can. And if you assume that it's a green light moment, your kid will let you know pretty quickly because they won't be able to talk with you or engage with you in a productive way. Okay. So moving on. Step number 3 is, again, listen with empathy and validate your child's feelings. So empathy, to give a basic definition, is feeling with someone. It's the metaphorical walking in their shoes kind of thing, right? So you're being empathetic by basically saying like, hey, this makes sense that you're feeling this way. I get this, right? And oh, even like, let's say your kid like scrapes a knee or something, and so you get on their level and saying like, oh, that really hurts, doesn't it? Right? That's a type of empathetic response. Validation, there's some crossover, right? So by validating, you're kind of being empathetic, and by being empathetic, you're kind of validating. But to be more clear, validating is basically just saying the exact words. It makes sense that you're feeling this way. I understand why you would feel this way, that kind of thing. Now, this kind of a caveat to this, or something to kind of keep in mind, maybe, is that validating is not necessarily condoning poor behavior or like giving them approval to do poor behavior. I know that a lot of like older generations were raised in this way that's like, pick yourself up, suck it up, you're gonna be okay, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, or if we coddle our kids, they'll not develop, whatever, which is absolutely false. Okay, it doesn't work that way when it comes to validation because of how this process works, where specifically you're going to help your kid learn how to work through it with your help, and that should get better over time, meaning they can deal with their stuff better instead of what happens when we do that old school style parenting, which is kids just learn to shut down. They just learn to hide it. They're still feeling it, they're just hiding it from you. So again, with validation, it's not about giving approval for poor behavior. We're validating the emotion, right? So we're not saying, hey, it makes sense why you hit your brother. We're saying, hey, it makes sense that you were angry and it's not okay that you hit your brother, right? That's what that looks like. So this listening with empathy and validating your child's feelings is very basic. It's just kind of sitting there with them in their feelings. And then after you notice them calming down, moving on to the next step. So empathy and validation calms our nervous systems down. That's the purpose of what we're doing here. Moving on to step 4 is help your child learn to label their emotions with words. Now, this may be just even one word, okay? And the stuff I mentioned at the beginning was step 1 of being aware of emotions. If you've done that work, you're probably going to be more familiar with some emotions that you could give them. But keep it basic. In the world of emotion, there are what are called primary emotions. Usually they consist of anger, fear or being afraid, sad, surprised, happy. But they can be other things, okay? Basically, keep it simple. If you're not sure what exactly they're feeling, pick your best guess. If they're crying, throw out sad. Does that fit? If they're kind of embarrassed, throw that out. If they're angry or frustrated, throw that out. We don't need complicated or elaborate words. We just need something. In fact, researchers and therapists have come up with a phrase called name it to tame it, which basically just means if we name the emotion, we tame our feelings. There's something about giving the emotion a name that helps kiddos feel much calmer. I think it has something to do with the fact that for kids, because they don't have words for what they're feeling, they just know they feel off, and that can be very dysregulating and kind of scary, like being afraid of the dark, right? You don't know what it is, you don't know what's there, so it makes it scarier. Same thing with these emotions that can be quite strong. And so by giving your kids specific emotion words for how they're feeling, it can make a big difference in terms of them working through it. So again, keep it simple. And yeah, sometimes even doing emotion coaching with happy emotions can be necessary, right? Where you might need to help a kid work through, hey, this is what you're feeling. usually looks a lot different than if it's a negative, destructive emotion, so to speak, but still helpful because they need to know and be able to recognize those positive feelings as well as the negative, right? So don't just get stuck using this with the bad times, use it with the good times as well. Okay, the fifth and final step is arguably one of the most important steps because it's what propels your child forward, not only in that specific moment with that emotion, but what helps them to be able to work through and process their emotions effectively throughout their entire lives. Kind of like what I was pointing at before, which is so important, right? So the biggest thing I want to emphasize with this final step is be a team together. Work on coming together and finding a solution that makes sense. So many things, oftentimes what I see parents doing, and myself too, I fall into this trap, is simply just telling our kids what to do, right? So, hey, because you're feeling this thing, you should do this instead to help yourself, work through that feeling or work through this problem or whatever, right? Like if your kid has a meltdown over the food you're offering, you might say, hey, I'll give you this instead, right? It's so powerful though to include your kids in the process of the solution because this is the coaching element, right? It's just like if you had a coach in a sports team that you played, the coach didn't just do it for you. The coach didn't say, hey, you need to hit in this way, and then pushed you aside and went and hit in that way for you, right? We need to be able to show them how to do it, but then empower them to do it themselves. And by giving them some kind of say in what this looks like, can be very, very influential in that process. But the key part here is us learning how to set appropriate limits, right? And so one kind of hack, if you will, is that if your kid is struggling with knowing what to do, try giving them 2 or 3 options and then asking them to pick which option makes the most sense for them. That way you're brainstorming with them, but giving them the choice and a way to kind of have some power and control in the solution that you come up with. So those are the 5 steps of emotion coaching. I'll review them again just real quick, okay? So step 1 is be aware of your child's emotions. Step 2 is recognize your child's expression of emotion as a perfect opportunity for intimacy or connection and teaching. Step 3 is listen with empathy and validate your child's feelings. Step 4, have your child learn to label their emotions and help them with that. And step 5, set limits when you are helping your child to solve problems or deal with upsetting situations appropriately. Okay, so I hope this has been helpful. I'm excited for you to try to implement some of this in your parenting strategies. And again, try it, work through any kind of stuff you come up with on your own. And if you need additional support, please reach out to us. We have therapists here who are willing and ready to help you with your parenting needs and with your emotional processing that you might be struggling with yourself. So again, my name is Spencer. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I wish you the best.